Hey everyone, welcome back. Howie here at High Octane Cards with the preview for tomorrow's Geico 500 at Talladega. This is the 52nd running of this event. There have been 103 previous races at Talladega. Of course, they only ran one race in 1969, two races in every year since. That first race in 1969 was won by Richard Brickhouse. That was a bit of a controversial race if you go back and do a little research on it. The first race at Talladega, there's only 11 or 12 Cup drivers or Cup teams that participated in that race. The rest of the teams were Grand American teams that participated in the Prelude race or the companion race. The Grand American Series was a series similar to the Xfinity Series, what it is now. Richard Childress did make his Cup debut in that race, as did Billy Hagan and several other drivers. Pretty interesting. There's a lot of information on Google and YouTube about it. You guys will just have to go check that one out. Of course, Denny Hamlin won that race in October last year as the most recent winner. Very controversial finish there, as he did go below the line. NASCAR ruled that he was forced. But again, it's a subjective rule by NASCAR. And it's one of those things, a lot of drivers have won that shouldn't have. A lot of drivers have had wins taken away. But that is, subject for another day. It's a discussion for another day. There have been 14 times over the years at Talladega that the pole winner has won the race. That's not a very, very high percentage. 54% of the time, or 56 out of 103 times, a top 5 starter has won. 73 times out of those 103, a top 10 starter has won, which we'll review the top 10 starters here in a minute, just to give you a review of those. So that kind of lets you know that most of the time that starting inside the top 10 is an advantage. Maybe not so much in recent years, but definitely, in the first 25, 30 years at Talladega, it did play a pivotal role. Jeff Gordon in 2000 started 36. I had to read my writing there. In 2000, Jeff Gordon started 36 for the deepest a winner has come in the field. The race record for 500 miles at Talladega is 188.354 by Mark Martin in 1997. Of course, that race was run caution-free, as was the 2001 race that Bobby Hamilton won. The track record for qualifying, of course, we do metric qualifying right now. The track record in qualifying is 212.809 that Bill Elliott set in 1987. And, of course, 2011, the closest margin of victory, Jimmy Johnson over Clint Bowyer by 0.02 of a second. That was during the tandem draft era, and there was literally 8 cars coming across the line at the same time. Pretty good finish if you go back and watch that. In the 2010 and 2011, there were 88 lead changes, so that is the record for lead changes in NASCAR at those two races. There's 9 past Talladega winners in tomorrow's race. That would be Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, Eric Almirola, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I don't believe I missed anybody. There's a couple almosts and should-bes on there, but, like I said, Talladega is a beast of its own. There's 41 times Chevy has won races at Talladega, 30 times Ford has, and 4 times Toyota has. And if you compare that to the manufacturers that will start tomorrow, Chevy has 18 in the race, Ford has 15, and Toyota has 7. Of course, only 5 of those are factory-backed teams. The other 2 is Timmy Hill, who is with Carl Long Racing, and Harrison Burton, who is making his debut with Gaunt Brothers, but I'm sure that is a Joe Gibbs project. My favorites, before we get to favorites, dark horses, and long shots, let's go with the first-time winners at Talladega. Talladega always had a history of bringing you first-time or surprise winners. This is the list of first-time winners at Talladega. Richard Brickhouse, we talked about that first race in 1969. That was his first career and only career win. Dick Brooks won in 73, again, his only career win. Lenny Pond in 78, Ron Bouchard in 1981, and Bobby Hillin in 1986. Those were their first and only career wins. I was at the race that Bobby Hillin won in 1986. Probably the hottest single day of my life. I believe they said it was about 105 in the shade that day. So it was extremely brutal heat, very intense humidity. I wasn't quite 10 years old. And I don't remember watching the last 10 laps. I pretty much remember having cold water poured over my head and being carried back to the van after the race ended. but it was a very competitive race. Look that one up on YouTube as well, the 1986 Talladega 500. That was a very, very exciting and competitive race, especially for that era. Back to first-time winners. Davey Allison, of course, won his first career race in 1987. Phil Parsons, Ken Schrader swept races in 88 as first-time winners. Then a little bit of a drought to 2006 when Brian Vickers picked up his first career win with that last lap pass of Jimmy Johnson and Dale Jr. when he kind of took them out. Brad Keselowski, of course, in 2009 had that last lap pass of Carl Edwards during those tandem draft days and sent Carl flipping down the front straightaway. And then in 2017, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. got his first win. First of only 2 career wins so far for Ricky. So anyway, let's review, before I get to favorites, dark horses, and long shots, let's look at the top 10 based on the metric qualifying. Row 1 is Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano. Row 2 is Martin Truex Jr. and William Byron. Row 3 is last week's winner, Alex Bowman and Christopher Bell. Row 4 is Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott. And row 5 is Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski. So based on the odds, there's a really, really good chance that your winner will come out of those 10. But a few that I'm looking at back here in the back, a little further back, Matt DiBenedetto starts 13th. You know, he's kind of hit and miss on the super speedways. Did he run second there in the fall? I know he came across the line in second, but I believe he may have been ruled to have forced some people below the line. Looking down here, Stenhouse starts 17th. Bubba starts 24th. He's always seems to be fairly strong on the speedways. Ryan Newman's 28th. He's had a lot of good runs on the speedways. So there's a lot of strong guys sprinkled through the field. Harvick starts down in 16th. So people all over the board, all over the field. Literally, I think if until you get back to the first or the last 5 rows, most everybody in those first 15 rows have fairly legitimate shot at winning, if not a strong top 5 run. So anyway, favorites, dark horses, and long shots. My favorites going into this race, and this is if you're doing like DraftKings or if you're doing, I don't think Yahoo has the fantasy leagues like they did for racing, but if you're doing any of the fantasy stuff where you have little pools at your work or your home or whatever, these are just kind of my guys that I would pick as favorites. I'm looking at Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney. Those guys have just been, beast mode on the speedways in recent years, as has Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano, probably 2 of the better speedway drivers. Of course, they were running first and second on the last lap of Daytona 500 this year, and we know what happened. But I think there's a good shot your winner is going to come out of those 4. Your dark horse stable, and these are guys that I feel that could win, and they always seem to run up front on these, and people still call them plate tracks, restrictor plate tracks, but they just now refer to them as speedways or super speedways. But I think your dark horse drivers are going to be Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, and Bubba Wallace. I think these guys can net you a lot of points and be really, really good for your budget, maybe allow you to pick up another favorite on your team, however you want to play that. And long shot drivers, I'm putting Michael McDowell in this. Yeah, he did win Daytona, but if you look at his past, he's always strong at Daytona and always seems to struggle a little bit at Talladega. So I think he could have a good run here. It is just all about luck at this track for him. Corey LaJoie's always seemed to be strong on the speedways. Spire Motorsports, of course, they had 2 cars in the top 10 at Daytona. Don't know if they're going to keep that going or not, but we'll just have to wait and see. Daniel Suarez has had a slew of strong runs this year. Of course, that disappointing incident at Martinsville kind of was a little bit of a setback. I could see him bouncing back with an easy top 15 as long as he stays out of all the wrecks and commotions. And Ryan Preece. Ryan is a great speedway driver. Of course, he got a top 5 there a couple years ago during his rookie season. He had a top 10 this year at Daytona. Of course, he started the year off with 2 strong top 10 finishes and has just slowly faded back. I was hoping this team would remain a little consistent, maybe stay in that top 20, 22 in points. They faded a little bit, but I could see them rebounding this weekend with a strong run. So overall, I watched the Xfinity race today. I watched the ARCA race today. The ARCA race was a little less competitive because you have a bigger gap between the competitive teams and the non-competitive teams. Overall, it was a decent race for what I expected of it. The Xfinity race was super exciting. Not really any what you'd call cup guys in the race. I think there may have been a couple of them. I'd have to go back and look at the standings, but if it was, it would have been somebody like JJ Yaley or Joey Gase, somebody that ran near the back of the field. There was no top tier cup drivers in this race. Unfortunately, it did get rain shortened, so I'm not going to spoil it here if you haven't seen the finish or know who won, but it was a rain shortened race. I do think tomorrow, as long as there's no weather issues, Talladega seems to have a couple of what they call the big one accidents involving 8, 10, 12 cars. I could see that happening. Of course, you got both stages, and then the basically final half of the race. We'll have to see how that turns out tomorrow. I think that there'll probably be at least one wreck of about 12 to 14 cars. There may be two, because these guys are starting to get a little crazy on the big tracks. I believe I mentioned in a previous video, you go back and watch Daytona and Talladega from the late 80s through the early 2000s. Daytona and Talladega, they very rarely had contact. They usually stayed about 4 to 5 feet apart, nose to tail width, that is, or nose to tail distance, 4 or 5 feet apart, and never got closer than that. And then they were always beating and banging at Martinsville and Bristol and Richmond and Dover and all these other shorter tracks. Now it seems like on the smaller tracks, they gap out and don't want to touch each other, and they lay all over each other at Daytona and Talladega, and they race closer than they start as far as lined up on pit road. So it makes for a lot of excitement on these two tracks. I think tomorrow will be what they call it, like a white knuckle racing, where the guys will just be amped up and they'll be ready to go. I think there will be a little bit of a lull after the second stage till about the last pit stop, where they'll do the thing where they run the high groove and just one long freight train. Don't like seeing that, but that'd be a good spot to catch a nap, mow the yard, whatever you need to do. So I told you the favorites, the dark horses, the long shots. Talladega, there really is no favorites, dark horses, and long shots, because legitimately 30, 35 guys have a shot to win this race. But we will see what happens tomorrow or Monday. We'll have the review video kind of recapping the race, grading it, etc. So, and then also tomorrow we'll have some card stuff for you too, guys. So don't worry about that. But anyway, thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Saturday evening. What's left of it. It's almost getting close to midnight. So have a great night, guys.